Yes, good evening, everybody. It's Photography Live and Uncut again. And where has that week gone? I just do not know. Only just a short while ago, I was talking to Rick Salmon. This week, my guest, I came across just a short while ago, in actual fact, although I've just found out, I should have realised he was around about 6 months ago. Found an introductory video in the Grand Library of the Arcanum, and found his video so interesting. I thought, I've got to get this guy on my show. So I sent him an email, and he said, yes, I'd be delighted to. Isn't that brilliant? So Scott Wyden Kvowitz, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for reaching out in the first place and having me on.
That's my pleasure, my pleasure. There's lots to talk about here, actually, because your website is so diverse in everything, and by the sound of things, we're going to find out more later on. This is obviously not your day-to-day breadwinner job, photography. You're obviously involved with other such things, but let's start off where I like to sort of get a geographical idea of where you are. Whereabouts are you based, Scott?
I am in New Jersey in the United States. It's the east coast of the United States.
And it's a little bit white, you're telling me.
A little bit. Looks pretty much like how my window looks is what the ground looks like.
So we're like 5 stops overexposed out there.
So I actually was doing a project with a bunch of friends, and part of it was photographing 36 frames without changing the ISO, so that as if you were replicating film. Yeah. And I had to cheat. I had no choice.
Really?
I've got a baby. I couldn't really take her very far, so we literally walked around the block, and I was doing this project walking around the block, and I had no choice but to change my ISO from inside to outside. It was just way too bright out there.
There you go. See, there's progress for you where you can change your ISO.
Yep.
I do what I do. Stick it on auto ISO and then go from there, and then you can work about with the manual controls if you want. It's great, isn't it, the way things are going? So how long have you been involved in photography then, Scott?
So professionally for about 10 years. I've been, making photos since high school, really. Mm-hmm. That's when I started taking photo classes, but didn't really get serious until I'd say midway through college, because I was actually a music major first, and I switched majors, and I was still doing photography, photographing bands. Whenever I would go to see bands play, and whenever I was playing in bands, etc. And then I switched majors, and then I really went for it.
Yeah. So. I just talk about irony. You haven't had a chance to watch last week's show because we were talking before, but Rick Salmon majored in music.
Right.
And I just find this totally amazing now, the amount of people that I'm talking to and reading about. There's this intrinsic link between music and photography. I find it fascinating. As I mentioned to Rick, Julian Lennon, Bryan Adams, and Moby, 3 of the latest music stars are heavily into photography. And you started off with in music yourself. What was your instrument that you preferred to play at that time then?
I play a lot of stuff, but what I was actually going to school for was originally it was music recording, and then I had to do instruments. So at school I was doing bass guitar.
Oh, right, okay, bass guitar.
But in bands I played anything from clarinet all the way to keyboard, synthesizer to electric guitar. So.
Fantastic, playing all those different instruments. I wish I could do that. I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
It's something which I did go to start music lessons when I was at school, but that lure of the rugby pitch and the football pitch was a little bit too strong for me at the time. And that was a few years ago, I'd hasten to add. So that's so basically then you started off with music, but then you've changed your degree, for want of description. Is this when photography started to kick in for you?
Yeah, so that's when I really started pursuing it. I started going to one specific local retail store and talking to their employees while also going to school for it, and basically got an in. And I'd say right near the end of college, I got a job there, started in the retail store, learned even more about just photography in general and the equipment and everything. And worked there for 6 years, not just in the retail store. They're actually a major camera warranty company, an international warranty company. So I wound up working in different places in the company, and I just learned so much. I had the flexibility to assist photographers while I was working and things like that. So yeah, I just pushed and pushed and pushed and learned everything I could. Took workshops as often as I could.
It's a great starter because James Madd did something very similar, didn't he? But from his college days, he would come home and he just went up to a photographer and said, "I just want to be your gopher. I just want to walk about and do anything. I'll make you coffee, tea, get your lenses." Great way to start, and super.
It is. So
what was your first recollection? What's your first camera recollection? What's the first camera that you can remember picking up?
Yeah, so the first camera I had, it's a sad story, but happy ending, I guess. So my biological father died when I was little, as you know, and both my biological father and my grandfather, both deceased now, were both hobbyist photographers.
Oh, great.
And so sitting on the shelf behind me, it was my first camera, which was my biological father's camera, which is an old Fuji film camera, which now has a light leak in it. Which
some nice effects.
Yeah, nice effects. So that was my first camera ever, really, was that. And then in college, when I decided to pursue it, I got myself a Nikon, I think it was an N80.
F80 over in this country.
F80, yeah. And then eventually digital came and everything
digital
changed.
came in on everything changed from there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a big Nikon user myself. First Nikon I bought was the Nikon EM. My first camera was the Zenit E, the big Russian brick.
Yeah.
But, couldn't get on with that one. Then I got the Nikon EM and then built up through, and I was a big Nikon user until just basically quite recently, where I switched to Fuji. But I've got up there. I've still got the EM. I've got a Nikon F up there, Nikon F65. Still got my attachments to Nikon, which is really nice actually. Great firm.
My grandfather, sorry to interrupt. My grandfather, he also gave me his Nikon F when he passed, and so I've got it sitting out there. He kept that thing in pristine condition. It looks like it's brand new out of the box.
Right.
So I don't even touch it. That just
I was going to say, did you stick a lens on it and go out sometimes and use it?
Yeah, no. I've got another Nikon F that I can use, but that one, that stays on the shelf.
That stays on the shelf. That's a good memory. And you made a very good reference earlier on. Scott Wyden Kvowitz. Wyden is the biological father's surname, which is there's a really nice touch you've done there, Scott, including that as part of your name.
Thank you.
So we've gone through the cameras now, and we're firmly ensconced in Nikon. It's been nothing else but Nikon cameras for you from day one, shall we say?
Yeah, I mean, so my first digital was actually a Kodak, but it was a Nikon mount lens. And boy, that thing was slow. and then D70 and then D700 and so on and so on. I did try the I'll keep this short. I did try the Sony mirrorless system, but I wound up returning it twice and sticking with Nikon and just gonna hold out and see what happens.
Yeah.
I've been considering a Fuji X-T1. I just don't know. Until Lightroom handles the sensor as well as other software does, I don't know if I'm gonna make that switch because I use Lightroom daily.
Yeah, interesting you say that. Actually, I'm a Fuji user, and let's just go back a little bit on what you've just said there about the Sonys, because I too had a Sony. I had the NEX3. I was fortunate enough to be invited along to a Sony presentation. This must have been about 4 years ago, and they stood up in front of us, and there was quite a few Sony users there, the old Alpha 57, 67 type cameras, and they said, we're going to be the #1 camera maker in the world in around about 5 to 6 years' time. So, of course, quite a few of the Nikon Canon boys at the back were saying, oh, yeah, really. But, you know, when you think about what they've done, especially over the last 2 years, it is amazing. It is truly amazing.
Yeah.
But I had the NEX3, and I just bought it really just for a walkabout, easy-to-use camera, but I just could not get on with it. I didn't like the menu. I didn't like the fact they didn't have a viewfinder. And in actual fact, the time that I did use it, when it suddenly hit me, was when I was on business in Dubai, I just couldn't use the back screen at all. It was just blown out. I just couldn't see a thing was taking the photograph. So a lot of top buildings missing, a lot of bottom buildings missing, all sorts of stuff like that. Basic errors.
Yeah, my issue with the Sony system was actually very different than that, than your reasoning. And one, I wrote about it on my blog. The second time, I did not write about it. But I picked up the A7R, and I went to go update the firmware, which has to be done through the camera, not through the memory card.
Yeah.
And at the time, Sony did not support 64-bit Mac, and they did not tell that in the software or anywhere on the website, and it completely broke the camera. It bricked it. It was dead. I was like, okay, that's stupid. Send it back. Second time, I picked up the A7 II. I pre-ordered it when it was announced, got it in the mail, used it, and again, I got it for the same reason. I wanted a walk-around camera as a daily thing. I've got a baby now, and I don't want to have to lug around my DA10 wherever I go. I want something lighter, and I brought it to a birthday party for my nephew, and it was a lowish light situation. Handled horribly. Yeah. I had to bump up the ISO all the way, and not only was it so grainy and still couldn't handle it, I was like, I can't do this. So I sent it back.
And that's the A7 II, the latest one, or the... Yep, crikey.
Yeah. And that's just an everyday situation. That's not anything special. It's literally a birthday party that the average consumer would go to.
Yeah, exactly right.
So, but with that said, those cameras would handle perfectly in the landscape situation or a street photography situation for the most part.
Just a little plug for our good friends Frederick and Doug, who do all about the gear. They did touch on this with this A7 II. They did a very good review of it. I must take my hat off to both of them. Especially Doug, he laid it straight to you. He did say the A7 II was a good all-round camera, but... And then he went into the details as regards to what the other cameras are better for in terms of their landscape or their street photography. The Sony A7s, I've heard them. They're not street cameras. They're not quiet enough in my book. I use the Fuji X100S, and you can't hear the shutter. Right. Now, when you start talking about the Fuji XT, I picked that camera up last year at a photography show, and I kept on. Well, it's an SLR. I know DSLR. I kept on going to the X Pro 1 because I just like that rangefinder pickup and feel of the camera. And I think this is what a lot of people don't consider when they're buying a camera. They just go by name. They don't talk about the feel and can they work it. Right. And but an interesting point you made about Lightroom. I haven't had a problem with any of my files from my XE1 or my X100S in Lightroom at all.
It could just be the XT1 that has this issue.
Maybe just the XT1, yeah.
Yeah. So I was in Acadia National Park in Maine with a bunch of friends, and 3 of them had XT1s, and this is when I got to actually use it for real, and I sort of fell in love with that, which is ever since then. Now since October, I've been like in my head like, come on, Nikon, compete or I'm going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And they told me that they can't use Lightroom because Fuji created this new sensor type that Lightroom doesn't have the ability, at least now, currently, doesn't have the ability to read perfectly. So a lot of times they find that if they process in Lightroom, the photos come out with sort of like a brushed painterly type look to it. Okay. So maybe in Lightroom 6, which is coming out, I think supposed to be announced in like a few days, maybe that'll handle it, but right now most people go to Capture One or wherever to process the XT1 and possibly.
There's another program which I've read on the blogs that some guys are talking about, but who knows with the Lightroom 6 coming out 64-bit, there's a possibility they've rectified that problem. I have noticed also with I'm on Lightroom 5 that we're now getting through the profiles, the camera profiles for the X100S, and that applies to the XE1 as well. It's using the same sensor. There's something special about this sensor, and with this Transcend sensor and the way they've actually set up the different the profile of the sensor with the red, green, and the blue cells which make those images, in my opinion, so much better. And you're quite right what you say about Nikon and Canon, or more Nikon from our point, because we're that side of the fence, so to speak.
Yeah.
Get involved. Come on, let's do something. There's nothing wrong. Did you ever use the 1 series, Nikon 1?
Oh, it's not a real. I don't think it's a real camera. It's not. It's a toy.
I did buy the V1, and I used the V1 quite extensively, and I was really pleasantly surprised, because when I saw it 1-inch sensor, I thought, no, this isn't going to work. But in actual fact, some of the images I got from it were very, very good. The only thing I would say about the V1, it was just a little bit too small in my hands. I've got fairly big hands, so that went. All my Nikon gear went, apart from my 3 manual cameras up there to get my Fuji. And
I don't want to turn this entire thing into a mirrorless conversation, but
we're going to.
Yeah, I know. I don't want a Nikon mirrorless that requires me to use an adapter to use my own lenses.
Quite agree with you.
But I did post not long ago on my Google Plus profile my what I would consider the perfect Nikon mirrorless camera.
Yep.
With bullet points of what it would be, and I just reposted it on Medium, and it's doing pretty well so far on Medium.com. So I actually, anybody who's watching this who is a Nikon shooter and wants a Nikon full frame mirrorless, go to my Google Plus profile and do a search for Nikon MX, or go to Medium.com and do a search for Nikon MX.
Right. Okay. I'm going to do that because I'm on Medium as well. I think it's a great blogging site to have on board. I'm going to check that one out. I, in actual fact, put the Nikon V1 against the Nikon EM and put a post in a blog, and I, in actual fact, said, Nikon, why can't you make this as a full frame camera? They were exactly the same size.
And so my main thing with the Nikon MX is I don't care if it's small. I don't. It can be the size of the D810. I don't give a hoot.
Right.
Give me the Nikon DX body.
Yes.
Take away the mirror and take away the prism.
Yes.
And throw in a Wi-Fi thing where the prism was, and
chuck all the other stuff in that you want. Yeah, exactly. Get rid of that mirror.
Give me a normal size that my hand can hold camera. That's just not 4 pounds or whatever.
Exactly. I think the one thing where the Nikon guys, I will call it Nikon, where what side of the pond you're from, and Canon, the one thing these guys have got up their sleeve at the moment is the professional user in terms of the sports photographer or maybe even the paparazzi type guys. Those cameras seem to still operate slightly quicker. They obviously focus quicker. I know in the old days the sports photographer would be zone focusing and all that sort of clever stuff in those days, but the present day photographer wants that fast focusing opportunity with the Canons and the Nikons. And I think there are still some mirrorless cameras which can't handle that. Although saying that, now the new breed that are coming on board with the 4K video, screen capture from the 4K video, that's the future as I can see it for the sports photographer.
That could very well be. Also, the Sony A7 II, in good light, that thing focuses blazingly fast. Yeah. So the technology is there.
It's there, exactly right.
And the Sony A7 II, it was the actual burst rate was blazing fast. So in theory, if Nikon did it right, they could do a full frame mirrorless that competes with their D4.
Yeah. I can't fathom it out actually, Scott, because I've been saying it for quite a few months now, probably years. They're dragging their heels over this for some particular reason. There's got to be a reason. And yet, again, another point, you look at the way camera sales are going both in Japan and in America, the mirrorless market is still not taking over completely from the DSLR ranges. They're still holding their own. So maybe Nikon and Canon are starting to think, well, I'm quite happy with what we've got at the moment in terms of market share. But the one thing that I would say, and I agree with you, they're going to fall behind because of the innovativeness that's coming through from the other manufacturers.
And they need to not just look at their financials from what sells the best. They need to look at how many Nikon users are switching to Fuji and Sony and so on.
That is a very, very good point.
and public about it.
Yeah, exactly right. Very true.
So, I mean, I know that every Nikon photographer that I know that switched to a mirrorless system that's not Nikon, when I ask them, if Nikon comes out with a full-frame mirrorless, will you switch back? And every single time, it's yes.
Yeah. 9 times out of 10 is because of the lens stable.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, those two manufacturers, and this is you see, you're hitting the nail on the head exactly as I've been doing. Those two guys together, Nikon and Canon, got such an enormous lens stable, it just doesn't match up, does it? Why don't they do it? Because it's all there for them. They just got to get the body right.
That's it.
There we go. Well, that was a good conversation about gear. That was going to be my next subject. Well, we'll forget gear.
Yeah.
Okay. What are we going to talk about now? Oh, I'll tell you what we'll do now. Why don't we go and do a screen share?
Okay.
Right, let's see how this works, because we were talking about this earlier on, and I've had a few slow issues with my my computer this end going through Google. So I'm going to go screen share, and if it doesn't work out, Scott's very kindly agreed to set his screen up to do the screen share. So let's bear with me on this if you don't mind, viewers. We have got some people watching live, which is absolutely fantastic. So if I go, so you should be seeing From the Streets as a full screen. Is that correct?
Yep, I see it.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Right. So I chose this one because street photography is my passion. So what I'm going to do is what I'll do, Scott, is I'll just flick through some. If you just like to talk about your images and sort of the type of thing you were trying to sort of do here, there may be some educational points you want to make in the image, fire away.
So my street photography is very different from the average street photographer. I'm actually more, so I consider myself an ambivert. I wrote a book that's on flatbooks.com called Ambivert's Guide to Street Photography, and it talks about how to do street photography when you're not an extroverted. You don't like going up to people and getting in their faces and talking to just random people about things. I do it here and there, but I don't do it every time I'm out in the streets. So my approach to street photography is more wider views from a distance, get more of the life happening rather than just the close-ups of individual people. And so this is a really old photo of mine. This is actually from when I was using that Kodak that I brought up.
Oh, right, okay.
Actually, the first 3 in this gallery are from that Kodak camera. So this is pretty old.
How many megapixels is that one?
At the time, I think it was 14, which was like huge.
Wow, that was big in those days.
Yeah, it was the Kodak DCS F14 Pro or something like that, whatever they called it.
I wasn't familiar with the Kodak digitals.
Yeah, so they had it was a Nikon mount, and then they made a Canon mount. Then it went away.
Great.
So these are from back. I don't think I had any purpose with these. They're just pretty much walking around and just capturing the street life in New York City at the time.
Yeah, love that angle.
Yeah,
I'm getting into corner-to-corner imagery at the moment. I just like it.
Yeah. So this was just people kept walking by pretty fast, and I just got that shadow, and I was like, "This is it. This is awesome." So.
Blood guy on the left-hand side here.
Yeah. Sometimes your photos don't have to be straight to be good. They just need to have something interesting.
No, exactly. I quite agree with you. When you look at some of Daido Moriyama's work, there's not. I don't think he's taken a single sharp image in the last 3 or 4 books that I've looked at.
Yeah.
Whereabouts is this, Scott?
This is also New York City. So a lot of my street photography is in New York City, only because I'm right there. I'm only an hour bus ride away. I used to live 20 minutes from there, so I was there a lot. So this is walking around New York City.
Okay.
The next one's actually in Baltimore. It's an older one.
Love the sky here. Look at that sky in the background. That's beauty.
Yeah. This one, I always photograph in color, and I'll do post-processing. Usually I just do it in Lightroom, but every so often I'll bring it into On1 software or Nick Silver effects to do black and white processing. But for the most part, I'm just in Lightroom.
Yeah.
This was actually in New York City outside of Natural History Museum, and That little rubber duck, I actually put it there. I was actually thinking about doing a project of putting the duck in random places.
Right.
And I saw the word explorer, and I was like, the duck's
That'll
the
do.
explorer. You
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Yeah.
I wound up not doing the project, but this was my favorite photo from the entire series.
Super. I've just clicked on a few images. I hope it's going to load straight away. It's going to get to this, which looks like. I don't think it's going to do it for me. Let's see what happens. No, it's not going to do it. Okay, so we'll come out of this particular gallery, and we'll go to another one. What should we do? People?
I'd say go to places.
Places? Let's go to places.
Yeah. People's more just like the portraits I get hired to do and things like that. But so this is more of like my travels and
yeah.
whatnot.
This was the page which I was trying to open up prior to talking to you before the show, and it's loaded. Okay, well there was a bit of a problem earlier on. It wasn't doing. Okay.
So this is actually from this is from Arizona.
Right.
From a few years ago, I'd say. I was actually dating my wife at the time, so it was maybe about 5 years ago or 6 years ago from Arizona. Actually, I actually reprocessed it recently. This is also from that trip, Church in the Rock. This one was one of my first photos that ever got published.
Right. Okay.
And I decided to reprocess it again, because over the years, you adapt and you learn new techniques and there's new tools out there. So originally, when I had this photo published, it was an HDR.
Yeah.
And I decided to revisit it and just one frame. That's it. I didn't need the HDR. I did it because I could. I didn't need it.
Yeah.
So.
Interesting you say that. So what you're saying, you just took the one image. Did you copy it 3 times, or was Lightroom enough with its tolerances to basically bring out the shadows and close down the highlights? How would you do that?
Yeah, so the original HDR was brackets. It was three brackets or so. But this Lightroom is so powerful now with the shadows and highlight slider that, and the I'm a big fan of the brush tool. That you really don't always need HDR because your sensor, for most modern cameras, the sensors have such a great dynamic range that you can pull data out of it easily, in a raw file at least.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree with you. It's Serge Ramilly's done that quite a lot on his podcast, where I first came across the idea of reducing the highlights and increasing the shadows, and you basically got an almost an HDR image just by doing those 2 simple things.
Yep. This is actually from Philly, from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I did a video that's in the Grand Library. For I think I put it on YouTube too. I don't know if it's public though. I did about a 5-minute tutorial of how I did this. I was actually in a Jeep with the top down, and street level, and this is looking up. So I actually used Lightroom's lens correction to make the perspective look like I'm higher up on the building, and again, recovered the sky using the highlights and whatnot, and brought out some texture. So I did a quick tutorial that's available in the Grand Library, and so it's cool.
Yeah, it's a good one. That's a cool shot. I love this.
This is one of my favorites from recent. So this Photo Plus Expo happens in New York City every October.
Yeah.
And Evgeny from 500 Pixels was in town, and he hosted a photo walk the first day of the expo, and I went and we walked what's called the High Line, which is basically it's a tourist trap. It's an old above ground rail line in New York City that is now basically a park / walkway for tourists to just get a view of the city. But what they don't tell you is that your view of the city is kind of blocked by buildings.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not the best view, and this was the last part that they needed to finish at the High Line, and it's such a cool view. And I just learned they're about to cover it up with something. It's very sad, but I'm glad I got this shot before it's too
Yeah,
late.
before I was done. Yeah, got a. I don't know whether you're aware in London by the Shard. There's a station there called London Bridge Station, and they're doing something very similar there. They're relaying track, and it's what it is the busiest station in London with so many links coming off it. It's almost like a hub,
Yeah.
and it's. I wouldn't say it's exactly the same as that, but it was this image that sort of gave me a sort of a sense of looking down the London Bridge lines.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
actually the Empire State Building's in
I
the
was just
distance.
going to say this is the Empire State here.
Yep.
Yeah. Nice easy.
This is from my Acadia National Park trip. This is what's called Thunder Hole.
Okay.
This was a sunrise, I believe it was.
Sunrise, sunset.
What was this? The days started blending together. We were there for like 4 days. This was a sunrise. This was our last stop before we all left and went home. So this is a sunrise. This was the last sunset that we had the night before.
There we go. Now we see the different colours.
Yeah. So this was Bass Harbor Lighthouse, I think it was what it was called.
Yeah.
So
see if we can just go on. See if I can select this one here with the. See if it clicks up. If it doesn't, we'll. No, it's not going to do it. Okay, so I'll come out of screen share. We should be back to normal now.
there you are.
Yeah, we're back. That's good. It worked. Oh, it's actual fact. I'll tell you what. I'm going to go straight back to it because it's literally just loaded. So just bear with me.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, no.
It just had to happen as we were.
Yeah. The gallery system that I use is actually one of the products that the company I work for makes, and it basically loads the images in the background after the first view load. So sometimes it takes a little bit for the others.
Okay, so it wasn't me then. It was
no. I mean, it could be a combination of the a slower internet connection and.
Yeah, well, yeah, wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I just saw this one as you were talking about the sunsets and sunrises, and I saw this one. This is obviously some fun fair type event going on.
Yeah, so the town I live in, or a town next to where I live, where my wife actually grew up, they have this county fair every year, and this was the night of their big fireworks and walking around there. And actually, at the time, I was using a Leica M9, and I had it on a tripod and got a couple shots like this around the fair, and this was a lot. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So there's another camera you've mentioned there. The
Leica. I used it for a little bit.
You lose it a little bit. You've got it. You don't. It's not a sort of a higher situation. You've actually got a Leica, yeah.
I had it for a little. I bought it because I thought I was really going to want to use it, and then my wife and I decided that we were going to have the baby, and I wanted a camera that had video, and I had a D800 at the time, which did not have video. So I was like, well, it's either get rid of my D800 or get rid of the Leica and get something that had video. And then as soon as I got rid of the Leica, the D810 was announced.
Typical.
And so I wound up selling both the D800 and the Leica, and I got the D810, and so
covered. When you go out shooting, Scott, what's your general setup for your camera? Are you an aperture priority preference, or is it other style?
So I am completely manual all the time.
Okay.
I use autofocus with the back button focus because my eyes suck, and I manual focus once the camera tells me it's right. I then confirm, and adjust as needed. But other than that, everything's manual. I will use other settings in certain situations, but typically, for the most part, I'm fully manual.
Manual on the ISO as well, or are you allowing that to autoplay for you?
Manual on the ISO as well.
Yeah, crikey. That's not really a street photographer's setup, is it? There's
so
many things going on. Of course, with your landscape photography, it's an ideal setup because that's exactly what Really, that's how the cameras work, not ideally for in that sort of situation. From what I can, I'm not really a landscape photographer. It's something which I must get involved with, to be honest with you. Let's talk about your workshops, because there's obviously was the main reason for me sending my email to you was after seeing your introductory to the Arcanum, which we're going to talk about later on, the Arcanum, because I just love it. I think it's a great setup and way of learning. Let's imagine I'm thinking about coming along to one of your workshops. What can I expect to get from one of your events, Scott?
So typically my in-person workshops have a classroom setting, and I'm trying to find ways to get rid of the classroom setting and do it like on location completely. Mm-hmm. That's the tricky part. But typically they have a classroom location. We spend time going through things. I'll do a presentation on whatever the topic is, answer questions as needed. Then we'll go out in the field and shoot. And it's my workshops. Sometimes I'm by myself. Sometimes I have a partner come and either co-teach it with me or just help me out. And it's one-on-one time always. Mm-hmm. I give everybody personal one-on-one time instead of just talking to everybody in a group like I have to do in the classroom.
Of course. Yeah.
But so I believe in personalizing it either way. So I do long exposure workshops. I've never done a street photography workshop because I don't really consider myself a street photographer. I just do street photography.
Yeah.
And I do it different than most. So for me, I don't think I'm the right person to teach people how to do street photography. All I can do is offer my own advice, which is why I wrote that ebook that I did.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I've done long exposure workshops, panoramic workshops, general workshops, just general photography, a lot of how to use my DSLR, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
also the other thing which I think is coming about now, and I'm reading this quite a bit, is it's not just necessarily learning how to use a camera, is it? Because I would think that the majority, I'm not saying all, the majority of people that come along to your workshops and other workshops know how to use the camera because of what they've read in books and stuff. It's more now, I find, it's more the thinking process and getting over the gain line. In street photography, for argument's sake, as you mentioned, a lot of street photography tutorials will say, right, I'm going to show you how to, or introduce you into stopping someone to take a street portrait, or
right.
Either like an Eric Kim, straight up in their face, Thomas Lutard, or Bruce Gilden, that sort of approach, and show you how that's done.
Yeah.
The other way is to take a step back and to sort of start talking about, I think I've got the ability to make you into a good photographer. I'm a firm believer that there is an innate ability to be a good photographer. I think you're born with that skill. Others will disagree with me. Others think that it can be taught. What side of the fence do you fall on, Scott?
I side on the fence where I believe you can't tell somebody how to be a good photographer, but you can help guide them by giving them advice and giving them things to try to improve. And whether they do it or not, that's on them.
Exactly.
That's actually, I started this thing called Vision Path, and it's exactly what this is.
Yeah.
It's literally exactly what it is. I want to know how to be a better photographer. I want to know what is my vision as a photographer. And vision cannot be taught. It's impossible. You can't. So all you can do is give them, projects or challenges to do. And we do this in the Arcanum as well.
Yeah.
Which is, oddly enough, is where I got the idea of this vision path, was to do a sort of really super condensed, get you started to thinking with your creative brain, about your photography. And so Vision Path is actually a 16-week email course. So you sign up, and you get one email a week. And the way I structured it is, you get week 1 after the first hour, and week 2 only comes 1 week after you open week 1, and then week 3 comes 1 week after you open week 2. So if you don't have time for week 2, you just don't open week. You don't open week 1 until you're ready.
Yeah, that keeps the pace, doesn't it?
It does. It's been helpful for people to know that
Yeah.
they don't have to rush. And even if they get all the emails, they still don't have to rush. They can do it at their own pace.
Yeah.
But the idea is basically, here's a bunch of things you can do that has worked inside the Arcanum, has worked outside the Arcanum, and I've compiled it for you in 16 weeks. It's actually 17 weeks, but I advertised it as 16. I have a little bonus one at the end.
One free.
Yeah, one.
Buy 16, get one free.
Yeah, and not only are you doing these things, but you're also getting feedback from people. I'm telling you to go out there and get feedback on social media, then share it with me so I can give you feedback, and I can give you the critiques and things like that. So it really is sort of a mini condensed Arcanum. It's not as personal as the Arcanum because I'm not doing one-on-one hangouts and things like that. I'm not interacting with a person on a daily basis. I'm, giving feedback when they send it to me, the photos to look at and stuff like that. So, but I also get them to write down what their goal is as a photographer, which that in itself has nothing to do with actually picking up a camera, but that in itself is going to get them thinking about their own photography.
Yeah, very true. You make some very good points here, actually, Scott, because I've been thinking this for some time, actually, with regards to, I mentioned this innate ability, and we and the cohort that I was with Valerie Jardin, we would obviously put our photographs out for critique, and the amount of times that people will say, "Oh, what about this particular point?" and you haven't even seen it. There may be some, I don't know, some red dot in the corner which you've just totally missed because you've been concentrating on another part of the image, and also I've found that when you go out on a street walkabout, you'll get someone who'll just disappear off the corner and go, "Where's he going? What's he going?" He's seen something which you haven't even thought of seeing, and I don't, as you say, I don't think you can teach that. I think someone has that vision, but you can bring it to their attention that these are the sort of things that you've got to start looking out for. The classic example, for instance, you go down an alley halfway, you take a photograph of someone walking across that alleyway, or a scooter or whatever goes across. Others will just carry on walking down that street. They would ignore that alleyway. Right. So it's those sort of things, and it's really refreshing for you to say that. And you did a very, very good segue there. Brilliant segue.
Thank you.
Absolutely superb. Yeah. I tell you what, I might as well have left the mic with you. You could have done the show on your own. You went straight into the vision path, which I saw an introduction to your vision path, and again, it's an approach to teaching photography, which is very refreshing from what I've seen that's out there. So, well done to that. Let's talk about the Arcanum. This is where we've crossed paths, so to speak. I've found you after you've been involved with what, 6 months now?
About 6 months, yeah, something like that.
What's your view on it?
So it's a really, really fantastic learning tool for photographers, and soon to be outside of photographers, videographers and whatnot. They're opening the doors to others soon. But it's really unique in a way that you're not just given an assignment and then you're sent on your way and you bring it back to the teacher. It's so different. It's structured in a way where you're getting this personal time. Again, you can only be so personal really through the internet. Yeah. Right? I'm fortunate because my cohort, most of them live near me, so I'm meeting up with them as often as I can. So far, I've met two of my apprentices, and I've got a photo walk I'm doing in New York City for my cohort and the entire Arcanum, whoever wants to come, in April. So I plan I'm going to be meeting a whole bunch of my apprentices. So for the most part, it's all internet-based interaction, but you're interacting through text. You're interacting through in a chat room, really nonstop. You're interacting in a Google Plus community nonstop. You're interacting on photos instead of just conversation, instead of just videos. You're interacting on photos, which is important. Offering feedback for each other and editing based on feedback, and apprentices helping other apprentices, not just the masters helping the apprentices. So imagine going to a college lecture and the teacher or the professor is talking to 100 people and they're saying do this, and then another student speaks up. That person's gone.
Exactly right. Get out of here.
Right. So it's encouraged in the Arcanum in order for the apprentices to
Yeah,
interact and teach each other.
you're so right, because this is something which um, I found listening to the critiques of your fellow apprentices helps you so much.
Yep.
And then to cap it all, you've the cherry on the cake, or however you want to describe it. The master then comes along and says, "Right, thank you very much. Let's have a look at your 5," and then goes through with it a stage further.
Yeah.
And the setup is just perfect. It is just perfect.
Yeah. And it's structured sphere 0 and 1, basically levels 1 through 20.
Yeah.
Are both levels 1 through 10 and 11 through 20 are both structured very similarly.
Yes, that's right.
And then levels 20 through 30, about to sphere 2, what they're calling it,
Yeah.
it's going to be very different. It'll be similar.
I'm looking forward to that, because as I said to you just before the show, I've graduated, for want of description. I'm sitting in the cozy lounge,
Yep.
waiting for the decision. We're having some fun, actually. We've been setting ourselves little 24-hour sort of images according to I don't know. I just posted one up for mirrors, and I was quite amazed how many images I got back. The inventiveness of these guys that produced it. And as it turned out, the image that I chose was a person who's literally just joined us, Bruce, literally just joined us in the lounge. It was a photograph taken out of a plane, a small single prop plane, of the mirror underneath the wing, and the mirror is obviously throwing back the image into the cockpit, so to speak. Haven't seen anything like that before, so that's what got my vote. But no, it's a great learning curve. Anyone out there who's watching and is thinking about it, shall I or shan't I? Really give it some serious thought, because it is a great way to learn. Not as we said, by the master alone, but by your fellow apprentices. And you meet so many people. My cohort is spread from Australia. We had 3 in the UK, 1 in Ireland, 1 in Scotland, myself in London, and then few in Europe, right the way across to America. It's fantastic.
One of the coolest parts about the Arcanum is one of the least obvious things that the Arcanum offers, and it's the fact that the master is choosing the apprentices.
That's right.
Because I'm going through what's called the antechamber when it's time for me to pick apprentices.
Yeah.
And I'm choosing based on my own desires of who I want to work with. So, if my focus is, most of my apprentices are landscape photographers. Some of them do street photography, some of them do florals and stuff like that. But I really went to general photography as my topic, at least for my sphere 0 and 1. My sphere 2 is going to be landscape only. But when I was going through, I was not picking portrait photographers.
No.
Because I don't want to, there's better people than me to teach portrait photography.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
I can do it. I've done it.
Yeah.
But I don't want to do that in the Arcanum. So I'm skipping over the apprentices that do portrait photography. I'm picking landscape photographers and just, I'm picking some street photographers, but I also picked based on where they're located. I wanted people that were my time zone or one time zone away from me, because I wanted people that not only are sort of on my time, that the hangouts can be a little bit more convenient, but people that are more likely that I can meet them in person. So I've actually got like 3 or 4 apprentices that are in Connecticut in the United States, like in one state. They're all in one state. So
that does make sense, actually, having them all together. So then you don't really have any major issues with hangouts and people chatting with one another. I suppose really to agree, that's something which we found a little bit difficult, one being in Australia and one being in San Francisco, to try and work it together to speak to everyone at the same time was pretty hard.
And I'm even finding my own apprentices are meeting up in person without me.
Yeah.
So they're doing their own thing, and so it's really amazing the fact that you can take the whole online experience and the leveling system, the whole gaming system, and the really unique learning style and take it offline and continue that.
And the other thing is, of course, you're not just learning from your experiences with your master. You've got the opportunity to go into the Grand Library and see some critique sessions with Scott Wyden Kvowitz with one of his apprentices, and I can't think of the other guy's name, Glenn, Doug Kay, and all the other guys that are basically apologies to the masters. I can't remember all their names. But no, that Grand Library is just was probably worth its weight in gold in that alone, to be honest with you.
So and that's why they actually made that its own subscription service, so you can just subscribe to that. Yeah. A perfect example of what you just said is Peter, one of the founders of the Arcanum, was in New York City, spontaneous. He and James basically organized a photo walk within a few days, and so we went. A.D. Wheeler, another master, drove down from New York, and there's a bunch of masters and a bunch of apprentices, and two of my apprentices came one from Philly and one from Connecticut, and one of them wound up connecting with A.D. During the photo walk, and she just got back from a Joshua Tree photo trip with A.D. and his cohort. So she's in my cohort, but went on a photo trip with another cohort.
Yeah.
So
it's this crossover, which is so good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Amazing little thing up. That's a good advertisement really for the Arcanum, and it's good to hear you talk about it, because your comments about it are exactly how I feel about it myself personally. What apart from these other things going, because we haven't even had the chance to touch on your ebooks that you've done. You've written books for Flatbooks, and there's another company. It's not crafting. Peach Prep, that's right. Press, yeah. You've done those books, and also you do these ebooks. What is there any future plans that you've got in line that you want to do, or are you really jammed with what you've got on at the moment?
I've got a lot going on. So I pitched a physical book idea to a publisher, and they turned it down, basically saying that the book is basically something that can be found online. So you can find the same answers online. And my reply to that was basically, thank you, I appreciate the time to consider it, but that's pretty much any book that's not a made-up story.
Very true.
So I decided I'm going to write this book, take my time, not going to rush, no deadline, and when I'm done with it, I'll pitch it again, see if they're interested. If they're not, I'll pitch it to PeachBit, see if they're interested. If they're not, maybe I'll self-publish. I'm not sure.
The other thing is Kickstarter.
I could do that. One of the things that is nice about ebooks is I really don't have to worry about sales tax so much.
Yeah, true. I understand.
And I don't want to have to deal with the sales tax. So if I do self-publish, I don't know how I would do it, it's tricky.
All I would say is Don Komarechka, who did the Snowflakes.
Yep.
He forgot to add one thing into his figures, and that was delivery. And of course, it's not just delivery to your country, but it's delivery throughout the world if you got the Kickstarter. So, and he said the amount of work that he had to put in with the publishing, never learn about the printing problems that he had as well. And thankfully, there was a good outcome on that. Kickstarter sounds like a good idea if you want to self-publish, but hell of a lot of work. Yep. I
mean, you can always do a blurb book, but it's pricier.
It is pricey, yeah. Blurb books, I think, are fine if you just want to put a book together for some family members, or put it out there if someone wants to buy it from time to time. But it's not a major publishing opportunity, is it? Like, you're going to sell thousands through that.
Yeah, the last resort, if no one wants to publish it, is I just self-publish it.
Yeah, exactly.
I can always pitch it to Flatbooks. It's something. The topic, I don't want to actually say what it is, but the topic is something that they might be interested in. So, there's either way, it's getting out there as a physical book or an ebook. It's going to get out there once I'm done with it. So
yeah, Well, good luck with that, and keep us posted, and no doubt you will when it gets around to the blog. And so that's an interesting little project you put for forward planning. Normally at this stage of the game, in terms of the show, I ask my guests to talk about either the two options, the 5 photographers with a one-word association, but Scott's chosen to do his favourite photographer. So, or is it photographers, plural? Off you go, Scott. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about two different photographers, both sort of the same era, kind of. And one is Robert Frank. So
yep.
Street photography, black and white. It's American photography at its best, really is.
This is the guy that Joel Meyerowitz went along to and said, "That's it. I'm going to be a photographer." Amazing story.
So his books are phenomenal.
Yeah.
Well worth looking for anyone who's interested in street photography, or not even just street photography, photography in general.
Yeah.
He is a master at photography, and he actually, when I was in college, I actually had to, I couldn't tell you every name now, but I actually had to study photographers, and I had to be able to identify the photograph, the type of film it was made on, and what year it was made. For 101 photographers.
No, 101.
That was an exam I had to do. It was not easy. But so I actually learned that Robert Frank had a project that every 3 steps he would click the shutter again.
Really? That's
an
interesting one.
So that's something that, why not try that?
Yeah, exactly.
So for anybody who's really interested in photography in general, especially street photography, Robert Frank's books are a must pick up. The other is someone that one of my projects in college, I actually had to replicate a famous photographer from photographic history, in my own style, of course. So I actually did Lee Friedlander. He's one of my favorites. Another street photographer, but he did things with shadows. His big thing and reflections. He always got himself in the photos one way or another. And I thought that's amazing. The fact that he can walk around and he finds the light enough that he can get himself in it, but it's a picture of the lady in front of him walking in the street. It's her back. And yet his shadow's on it somehow. It's just and it works.
That's clever.
Yeah. So oddly enough, I don't consider myself a street photographer, although I do street photography, and yet my 2 biggest inspirations in photography, my 2 favorite photographies in all the history of photography, are street photographers.
Street photographers. Is that because of composition, do you think? Is it the I find there's a lot of freedom in street photography in terms of there's so much going on, the activity that's going on. Everything's different every single day. And I'm not saying that for one second that every sunset or every sunrise is exactly the same. It cannot possibly be the case. But do you think it's down to that? Do you think it's down to the freedom of street photography?
I think it's down to the freedom is one. I think composition is another. The fact that they're always thinking outside the box.
Yeah, exactly.
The processing they did in the darkroom is a big factor. Because we try today to match what these photographers did years ago.
I know. So,
it's just thinking. Overall, just thinking outside the box in general is something that I'm all about. I don't like doing what is standard. I like trying new things. And
you're right. It is thinking outside the box, and I think this again comes back to what we were talking about, the innate ability, where someone has the ability to think outside the box. I was talking to Rick Salmon a couple of days ago because one of his big things about photography is he uses his music ideas to change the view on what he's trying to photograph. He introduces certain aspects which he would do if he was playing an instrument. But there was one story that I gave him, which was about a famous golfer. I used to play a lot of golf when I was younger, and he's standing in the middle of the fairway, and the caddy came up to him and he says, "Right, okay, how do you see it?" So he said, "Well, let's look at it." He said, "You've got the green that slopes towards that bunker on the left. We've got a bunker at the back, and we've got a lake on the right." So he said, so what do you think? He said, so, well, I think that bunker on the left-hand side is looking pretty inviting for me at the moment. He said, you've got to be joking. He said, no, I'm going to hit the ball into that bunker, splash it out, 2-putt, and walk away from this damn hole. But he was thinking outside the box. He wasn't going to sort of try and hit that pin and drop the ball in around 6 inches and putt and get the birdie. He knew this was a dangerous hole. So he's thinking outside the box. And sometimes I think about that. It's probably a bit loose with regards to how you go about your photography. But it's that attitude of thinking outside the box is, what can I do that is going to introduce my sort of little bit of style, into photography.
Yep.
It's
sure.
It's a good way good way to think about it, thinking outside the box.
And the only way to figure out how you are going to get your own little twist into things is to keep doing it and
exactly.
keep trying.
Keep going out there all the time. Exactly. I wouldn't say go out when you don't want to go out. That doesn't work. But certainly try and get yourself into the habit of practicing as often as you can.
There is one thing that might be worth doing even when you don't want to force yourself. And it's one of my little tricks that I always teach people to do. And it's what I call a 3-mile photo walk. Where take your camera, take your phone, iPod, whatever it is, headphones, let's put on music, and walk 3 miles from your house in any direction, and then walk back. And you're photographing whatever it is along the way. You're getting exercise, you're getting out there, fresh air.
Yeah.
You're not wasting your time, and your camera's in your hand, so you're going to pick it up at one point, at least once during that walk. And you're going to photograph something, whether it sucks or whether it's awesome. But you're going to do it.
Exactly right, especially when you're walking a dog.
Yes.
Which I think I might be doing, fingers crossed, this weekend with my little girl.
Yep.
That's lovely. Scott, this has been, there's no other word for it, fantastic. I've thoroughly enjoyed this chat, and I hope we've had some viewers, live viewers, which is brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us. Can't thank you enough, Scott, for joining me today on a cold New Jersey day. But you've been tucked up in the warm there. Hope your baby decides to sleep tonight. Let's drop a little brandy in the milk. It always. But I didn't say. But anyway, getting back to seriousness, thank you so much for joining me today. I've really thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I've learned a lot actually from speaking to you, and I'll be on that website as well, reading up on your blogs and all the other gear. Let me just want to bring attention to the viewers that are here and people that are going to be watching the YouTube later. Photography Live and Uncut is now available on iTunes. I'm continuously posting that out on Facebook and Google Plus and tweeting. It's going to take some time to catch up because this is the 42nd show, so it's going to take me some time to catch up with that. But it is now available on iTunes if you want to sit back and listen rather than sit back and watch. So do that, and so please subscribe to both YouTube and the iTunes. That's my little advert over. Scott, I'm going to post all your links and everything else on my blog when I do that over the weekend for you. And thanks again for so much for joining me. It's just my little sign off now. I keep it nice and simple. If you're out there shooting this weekend, leave your camera bag at home. Thank you for watching, everyone. Bye for now.